From the television studios of the Jack J. Valenti School of Communication on the campus of the University of Houston, this is the Discovery section of Graffiti, the electronic newsletter of the College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences. My name is John David Powell. The 81st session of the Texas Legislature recently adjourned with the passing of two historic higher education bills that have great significance to the University of Houston and to the school's drive to be the state's next Tier 1 research university. One bill, a constitutional amendment, creates a fund to finance top-tier research by UH and the state's other emerging research universities. The other bill, enabling legislation that provides a pathway to access those funds. Now, a few days before we tape this, during the third week of June, Governor Rick Perry signed the enabling legislation into law. Texas voters decide the fate of the constitutional amendment in November. If passed, the amendment establishes the National Research University Fund, or NRUF, a dedicated fund for universities meeting specific national standards, such as the annual amount of federal research expenditures and the number of doctoral degrees awarded each year. Renu Khator, the Chancellor of the University of Houston System and President of the University of Houston, is here to talk about this and maybe some other topics, including the 81st session of the Texas Legislature. And President Khator, this is an historic time for the University of Houston.
You bet. It's a historic moment, I would say, simply because that was the one thing that we went after, and our message was very clear and very concise, and that is, we really want this university to be a nationally competitive research university. Now, you always have a purpose, but then you always have a flag that you raise, and a flag that can symbolize, and flag that can create passion. And so our flag was being a Tier 1 university. I mean, this is Texas. People like to hear about top tier or Tier 1. I mean, and it really resonated very well with people. And we provided them exact action items as to how we would become one, what gap exists right now, what kind of help we need from the legislature, what kind of help we need from the community, what kind of help we need from the alumni. And I also had to always go and give the message how absolutely fantastic this university is and how proud I am of the faculty and staff who have built this university without ever being funded for that particular purpose like some other institutions.
Sure. All right. So the question then on some people's minds is, what is Tier 1? And we tried to explain it's many things, but what is it?
Right. Okay.
What actually sold the legislature that this is Tier 1?
Okay. That's a very fair question because I got asked that question all the time.
I'm sure you did.
Now, and some people try to say that there really is no such thing as tiering, or there is no such thing as Tier 1. Well, my argument is that any time the universities are nationally put in a group or are grouped together, whatever is the top group is Tier 1. And that's how we took the definition. There are 3 national organizations that are reputed ones that do the tiering for universities to be nationally competitive. Of course, AAU, we all know what that is, but that is by invitation. And that's out there for us, but definitely not the immediate step for us. But then there are 2 other organizations, the Carnegie Foundation. They tier universities or they group them together based on their research capacity and research performance. And then there is Center for University Performance. They have their annual report called TARU, or Top American Research Universities. They again group universities together. So our desire is to be a nationally competitive university. And how we will know we have arrived there? Once we break into the first tier or top tier of any of these 3 organizations.
All right. So let's take the Carnegie, for instance.
Okay.
There was a time when Carnegie had a different classification system, and then universities were using that, and they said, no, we don't want you to use that.
Right.
So they did away with that, and by one of the Carnegie definitions, you have to award something like 50 PhDs a year. Well, we were doing this back in the 50s. So what do we, since a lot of people do know the Carnegie,
right,
where do we have to be with the Carnegie folks to be Tier 1?
Carnegie changed their definition about 2 years ago. Earlier they did call it tiers, and now they call it simply as being a very active research university, or just a high active research university. Now we want to be again in the top group. Whatever that is called, it doesn't matter. There are several measures, and you picked the right one, Carnegie. And I'll tell you why, because class has a much more substantial role to play in Carnegie's definitions. Because, first of all, Carnegie has measurements that are divided into two categories. One are the absolute numbers, like absolute numbers of research dollars brought, or absolute numbers of citational impact, or citations given. But then they also have the measures where they divide that one up by the number of faculty you have, so that the universities do not suffer. Either you can have a good rating in the aggregate numbers, or you can have good rating in terms of per faculty. And they just take both of those and average them out. But then when they have PhD, or when they have research expenditures, or when they have citations, they look at not just overall, they also break them down according to disciplines. So you have science and engineering research expenditures, but then you also have research expenditures in social sciences and humanities. So therefore, I think that's a much better measure. It's a more comprehensive measure. It talks about the solid and overall strength and I think the breadth of excellence in a university.
All right, so part of these, we need to have something like $100 or $150 million in annual federal research expenditures?
Okay.
Or is it?
Let's not confuse that one. That $150 million, that is the state definition.
Okay.
So we have one.
Lots of these definitions?
Lots of these definitions, sure. State of Texas, the coordinating board, has tiered the universities. First tier for them is the universities that are called research universities. And they are the ones where they have $150 million or above in research. Then they have second group, which is called emerging research universities. And that's where 7 universities are there, including us. So we have to break that $150 million in order to at least get the state to put us in their tier 1. But if we did break into $150 million, given what we are doing in other measures, chances are very good we will break into Carnegie's top tier or TARU's top tier as well. So that's not a bad goal to have, that we need to really double our federal research.
All right, then the other question is, why do we need this? Why does the University of Houston, Texas Tech, or the other ones, why do we need to be a tier 1?
Right.
Why not just go ahead and do the type of research and teaching that we already do?
Right, and it's an excellent question. From faculty's point of view, from staff's point of view, I think we need the funding that truly can give us our maximum potential. I do think that we have the potential to play a much bigger, better role and to play a role in the national scene. And I think so that's why it's important. But let's talk about why it's important for the state of Texas. If you look at other states and you look at what competitive edge they have, I mean, New York has 7 tier 1 institutions, California has 9, Texas has only 2. And that argument resonated very well with the legislature and the community, that we are not competitive. And I think they listened to that thing. Second thing is, let's take a look at Houston. Why it's important for Houston to have one. It's a metropolitan area of 6 million people. There are 3 other cities that are larger than us. All of them have multiple tier 1 institutions. Well, we do have Rice here, which is a fantastic university. But take a look at the scope. Rice's total population is 5,000. We at the University of Houston graduate 8,000 students. So having the University of Houston become a tier 1 institution is really very important for Houston. It will create more jobs. It will bring in more federal dollars, and each federal dollar that we bring into the region, it generates $18 worth of economic impact. It will mean that we will have the workforce that is ready to compete in the board and in the nation. So from all of those angles, it's very important. When I go to alumni, they say, oh, why do you think it's important for us? And I say, because your degree is like a stock. And when the value of a stock goes up, value of your personal stock goes up as well. And therefore, as the University of Houston becomes more nationally known, more nationally competing, more globally acclaimed, it's going to be better for your degree. And I think they bought into that as well.
All right, we're going to take a real short break, and we'll be back to continue our discussion with Renu Khator.